right. Hey, guys. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the podcast side, live on AVE. I got a special guest with us tonight. I got two special guests. So I got a co-host tonight, Austin Jackson's kids having a birthday. So if you guys want to leave a little comment down there, leave some happy smiley faces. His son's birthday is today. So Austin, sorry you couldn't be here tonight with us, but Ed's coming in to replace you. And happy birthday to your son, bro. I hope you guys have a great day today. I hope he has an amazing birthday because you're an amazing father. So congratulations to that and a new day, another day, right? To have a kid. I'm going to bring in Ed with us real quick to introduce our special guest for the night. I'm excited to have Ed on here. Ed's an audio engineer. Our speaker tonight is an audio engineer. Obviously, it's Beckie Campbell, super good friend of mine. We met through my time in Orlando, through the SoundGirls community, through some AV Educate stuff. We've done some collaboration stuff. Anyways, I'm super excited about it. So let me just bring in Ed to introduce her, and we'll get moving on that, guys. And thanks for being here so much. Iris, I saw your comments. Thanks for loving the new intro. I really appreciate that. I do work hard on these things. Ed pushes me to work hard on these things, so it's really him, the brains of the operation all across the board. So anyways, without further ado, let me first bring in Ed Willock.
Hey, what's going on, Omar? First of all, I'm not replacing Austin Jackson. I am just filling in. No one could replace Austin Jackson, hardest working man in AV, but next to you, of course. You literally are. You texted me today that, you were finishing up a job and then doing a 4-hour drive to get home to make sure you were here in time to get back on the podcast. So, yeah, obviously
yes.
you're the hardest working person in AV.
I try to be.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm super excited tonight to welcome Beckie Campbell. She's one of the hosts of the SoundGirls Podcast. If you don't know Beckie Campbell, this is going to be a great time to meet her. Great person. So if we can, let's just bring Beckie on in.
For sure.
We'll start our chat. Hey, Beckie, how are you?
I'm awesome. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invite.
No, I've been trying to get you on the show for a while now. Not that I said it personally, but I mean, the last couple of weeks I've been texting you and I was like, we got to get Beckie on here, man. She's an awesome person. She'll be great for the show. We talked about it a few times, and I think everything, the stars finally aligned, and we got you on the show.
Finally worked out. I rushed home too, just like Omar did from working, and climbed out of a ceiling and all that fun stuff. So yeah.
Awesome.
Tell us about that. What were you working on today?
I was working at a church today and trying to get some streaming stuff online with Pro Presenter 7. So trying to get some lower thirds going for the church and eliminating a volunteer position. So that'll be fun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're more than just an audio engineer. You're doing video work and you're helping out in the House of Worship market. Is that a big market for you? Do you do a lot of House of Worship?
Yeah. Actually, I did. Started my career off doing Houses of Worship as a technical director and running front of house for all the events at a mega church in Orlando, actually. So started off doing that and moved into another mega church doing technical directing, which is, if you don't know Houses of Worship, it's a production manager position, really, and producing the whole show or service. So they call that the technical director in churches most of the time.
Gotcha. And multi hats, I'm assuming.
Indeed.
Lots. Yeah. I'm not unfamiliar with that world, but yeah, that's definitely challenging, and it builds your chops because you also have a lot of staff who maybe aren't super technical people.
Yes, that's the challenge, really, that you run into is most of the time churches run off volunteers. So, when you get to something that is volunteer based, those guys have, 60 hours a week somewhere else already. And it's usually not in the technical world. So that becomes a challenge. You have to train and show them the importance of cues and hitting the cue and hitting the mark and being on time and all that fun stuff. So it can be a challenge for sure.
And not just that, I guess you also, some churches would have different services during the week. They might have an evening on a Wednesday night or something. And then there's always the youth services too. So
right.
You probably have a lot of different, not just the same crew for every type of service. And then every service has different needs. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people don't even think about this either, but there's weddings in churches, there's funerals, there's all sorts of AV that goes into both of those. A lot of churches rent their spaces out to other people to do conferences or so you get involved, in a little bit of everything, even sometimes some theater production stuff. So a lot of things that it crosses over all the audiovisual world, and now with streaming, that's become a real big deal in churches since the pandemic, And a lot of churches did not have proper streaming protocols even set up. So that's been a lot of my year this last year.
Wow, that's great. It must be really rewarding to do that work too, because you know that it is a lot of volunteers that are doing this. And if they didn't have someone with your knowledge and experience, they'd kind of be lost, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. After like being in the pandemic and all of that, and setting up and helping churches, about 7:00 Sunday morning, recently, my phone just starts going off, and it's 7 or 8 different people that are like, bling, 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 oh, this isn't working and that's not working. And how is I get this? And, so that's what my Sundays have looked like all year, which is kind of fun, but it's challenging and fun at the same time.
That's great. That's great. So can you tell us a little bit about the SoundGirls podcast?
Yeah, it's kind of a baby project of myself and Susan Williams, who is the co-chapter head in Orlando with me. We had done an expo in Orlando with SoundGirls a few years ago and did a open panel discussion kind of situation, and just had people just ask us whatever. And we were all live sitting on stage, and it went on way longer than we expected it to. And we had so many people ask us after that, man, you guys should start a podcast. You're so funny and you're this and you're that and whatever. And we kind of laughed about it, for a good year. And then when the pandemic started, I was bored. That's really how it happened. And so I asked Susan if she wanted to join me, and she has 2 jobs. So she was kind of like, well, I don't have time for this, but she's a good friend of mine and humored me and was like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So we emailed the SoundGirls and said, hey, we'd like to take this project on. Part of being with the SoundGirls and part of that organization is to mentor young women in audiovisual, in sound. And so the idea of the podcast was, let's start it, let's get the ball rolling, and then hand it off to someone who's real passionate and wants to do this. But let's get them going, So we're actually in the process of interviewing people and getting ready to hand that off in May, really.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, for anybody who's watching who maybe isn't as familiar with the SoundGirls as we are, clearly they just haven't been paying attention, because I know Omar's talked about it plenty, and I think we've had some SoundGirls members on the podcast before. Can you just give us a brief overview of what SoundGirls is, how people can find the organization, and really what the mission is and whatnot?
SoundGirls.org is where you can find us. And we are international. We have chapter heads all over the world that put on mentoring events and trainings and stuff monthly. Obviously, that's been a little hard with COVID, but it's basically just a resource to help get women in our industry and noticed in our industry. A lot of times, like you realize over the years of live events or any, business industry, entertainment industry related things, you don't see a lot of women, and you haven't, but a lot of people weren't taught from a young age, including myself, that this is something we could do. Back in the day, it wasn't a woman's job, so that we're breaking the glass ceiling in that and saying, hey, we're here. We have been here. It was started by Carrie Kais and Michelle Shabolicek-Patnano, and they are both live sound engineers. Michelle has been running front of house for 30 years. Carrie has been running monitors for over 30 years with Pearl Jam. And all sorts of cool women that do cool things, And so they recognized that there's a need for women in the industry to be recognized and to say, hey, we've been here, we're doing this, and we're going to help you get in and get a job and climb up the ladder, So a bunch of us that have been around for years have started with mentorships, and we take on mentors and either Zoom with them or whatever and help them get to where they need to be, plug them into organizations or things like that. We have a private Facebook page, so you can ask any question you want. And they get answered, which is really cool. Like, I'm on there a lot. Omar's on there. You don't have to be a woman to be on there. But one of the things I noticed when I first jumped in is it wasn't a lot of this old school mentality of, go figure it out, or whatever the old patriarchy term was, do it yourself. And a lot of the things, if you've been on any sort of social media, you've seen how crazy it can become when people ask questions. So we really strive to answer the question and get you the help you need instead of just busting your chops,
That's great. That's so very supportive community. It sounds like
Very much.
and the mentorship. That's a big thing for anyone, but I think would you say especially for women in this industry, because it can be a bit of a boys' club.
Yeah, well, and a lot of that too is, if someone asks you when you're out on the road, like, hey man, who do you know that can run monitors? Because your monitor engineer got sick or something happened or they had to leave, like your first thought is going to be your buddy or who you've worked with before. So if the only people you've ever worked with before are men, or those are your buddies, you're obviously going to call them. So where do you go to find the women, and you want to diversify, like, where do you look for women who do this? I've had a lot of people say that to me over the years, like, well, I just can't find any women. And I'm kind of, now, if you have that excuse, it's an excuse. We're here, and you can find us. So that's where we try to eliminate that excuse right off the bat, which I think we've done a fabulous job of.
Absolutely. I was fortunate enough, I was someone who went back to school later in life to get that piece of paper that said I knew kind of some stuff.
Sure.
And I went to a college, SUNY Purchase up here in New York, that had for studio production. And fortunately, through that program, I got to work with a lot of great female engineers, both in the studio, and while I was there, I kind of ran some of the on-campus venues. And I had a lot of female engineers who were working in the live spaces with us that are phenomenal, and to this day that I'll call for jobs when I've got work that's in their geographic area. So fortunately, I had that exposure, but in the wild, that's not so much the case. There's definitely a lot less women in some of the spaces that I work. But the women I work with on a regular basis are some of the hardest working people I know, and very skilled and talented engineers, A1s, A2s, video. I'll tell you, I did a production of Shen Yun at a theater, and their video engineer, she was phenomenal. That's probably awesome. The way she did a triple convergence side by side, I was pretty impressed. And not for a woman, for any engineer. That I hate that phrase. Like, she did pretty good for a girl. That
drives me insane. I hate it.
I can't even imagine, actually, to be honest. But
I twitch. Yeah.
But it's a great point that if we aren't exposed to having women that we work alongside, you're right. The phone call's not going to get to them if us men in the industry aren't actively trying to find women who are in the industry, because we don't get to work with them often. So getting women in those jobs and in those environments so that they are the next person that we think of on the list is super important. And it sounds like SoundGirls is helping to make that more of a commonplace.
Yeah, we actually have, if you go on the SoundGirls website, we have a directory that's called the EQL Directory. It's powered by Spotify. And you can type in, if you're a woman, get on there, put your information in. People are looking for you. That's where you can find us, EQL.com, I believe. I'm going to check that out. I'm going to look it up and I'll put it in the chat notes. But yeah, it's definitely on the soundgirls.org website if you go on there too.
That's phenomenal. That's great. I am going to make a note of that, so the next time I'm looking for some talent,
Thank you.
I know where to go. That's great.
Yep.
So tell us a little more about the podcast, though. When does the podcast come out, and where can people find it?
So you can hear us anywhere that there are podcasts. Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, all those places. And we come out on Tuesdays at 9:00. Every Tuesday we have an episode that comes out. There's some really cool stuff, cool people that we get to interview, which I'm honored to be able to interview. We just had Leslie Ann Jones on. She's the head of Skywalker Sound out in LA. She's phenomenal. And I was super starstruck to interview her for sure. I'd like, what do you ask a woman who's been doing this for 100 years and runs Skywalker Sound? Like, do you know George Lucas? She does.
I'm starstruck talking to someone who just got to talk to her right now.
Right.
That's phenomenal. Yes. Who's maybe some other guests that you've had on?
So we're going to have Carrie, who's one of the head of the SoundGirls, on here shortly. We haven't nailed her down yet. But we've had like Samantha Potter. She's the head of one of the Pro Sound News editors and Church Tech Podcast. She's the head of that. Let's see who else we've had on. I'm gonna butcher everybody's names. This is why I have Susan. Like Susan reads the bios. She does all the cool stuff that I can't do, and I'm mostly the goof off person on this podcast.
We need a Susan then, because I butcher everybody's name too. This is
I was gonna say this is really familiar sounding conversation to the one we had a couple days ago.
Like we just interviewed Carol Urban. She's actually coming up in a couple weeks or next week maybe. She does like all the sound and stuff for Grey's Anatomy and the new Steven Spielberg show that's out. I can't think of the name of that, but The Stand. So she's doing all the sound for that. We just had her on. She's freaking awesome. Dude, like some of these people just blow my mind. Katie, she works for 8 Day Sound. Who else do we have? Like some of these, Dave Ratt we had on, names that some of you guys probably know, just in the industry. Brad Maddox, Greg Price, a bunch of different guys that we've had on, and then a ton of women that we've had on. We try to toss it up between audio recording people and live recording people, ADR people, Foley. We had a Foley artist on from
that's so cool
from out in where was she, like Albuquerque or somewhere, just really cool stuff, and get to dive into these people's careers too and how long they've been doing this and realize like nobody's talked about you in 30 years. How is that possible? You've done some really cool crap, and it's really neat to just hear their stories and hear how they got into the business and who let them get a foot in the door and how hard they had to push some of them, and how they paved the way for some of us, to be in the industry too. And then just what they're still doing is mind boggling to me sometimes and gives me a little inspiration, that I don't have to quit early.
So then I'm going to ask you, how did you get into the industry?
I have a very strange story. I was just goofing around in my 20s and basically just being a complete wreck. And I ended up in jail at some point and came out of there, went to a church and started running AV. I graduated from Full Sail University like in 2001. And I graduated about a week before 9/11. So I had over 200 resumes out and 0 callbacks, if that kind of tells you where the industry was at the time. And couldn't get a job to save my life. And a friend of mine knew somebody in a church that needed some help. So I went there and I had 8,000 community service hours to work off. So that's what I did.
Wow.
That's a weird story, but it's true. So they signed my community service paperwork and I ran sound for the church. And that's how that works.
That's pretty crazy story. And not the way people typically get into the industry, but you did go to Full Sail. So you obviously had some interest and passion for doing sound prior to all that. Yeah.
I don't know that I actually knew that you could be a roadie and make a living. I don't know that I still know if you can or not, but it's fun. I'll tell you that. It's the whole point of that. Like, I've always been into music. I've always been the kid that, like, if I got a watch for Christmas, I'd tear it apart before, New Year's and try to put it back together. Like, that's just the kid I was. I was always tinkering and trying to take apart boom boxes and stereos and trying to figure out how things worked. I remember being a little kid sitting in my uncle's Jeep, lock myself in there and listen to 8 tracks of Three Dog Night and try to figure out how they did harmonies and what was that sound. And, so I've always been really interested in music and picking it all apart and that type of stuff. I have 16 aunts and uncles, or 14 on one side. I lost count. And they were all really into music and used to go to concerts and bring me back T-shirts and tapes and all sorts of stuff. So I've really been interested in music since I was a kid. And didn't know that you could do it for a living, but was always interested in it. And I knew I couldn't sing. I can't carry a note. And I tried to play in band and I played flute for like 2 years and that was enough of that. And so that's kind of like it, for me, like, oh, well, what can you do other than be on stage, and if I can't be good at that, then I'm not going to do it. And my dad and I were talking when I was like 23 or something. And he's like, you got to get in school, man. You got to get in college. Is there a college that does music stuff like what you want to do? And I didn't know. So I started looking around, and internet wasn't huge back in those days, you know. But I found one in Orlando, and I happened to live like 5 miles from it, which was weird. And so we went down one day and just signed me up, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, it's funny. We were talking a little earlier, and so many things that we are on the same wavelength with. And my dad was one of 12 kids, so that's another.
Oh, that's crazy. Are you sure we're not related?
Yeah, seriously, that's pretty nuts. And I was a musician, but a bad one. And my fallback kind of was getting into audio. It was like, oh well, if I don't make it, at least I'll be producing and whatnot. So that's pretty cool. That's
awesome.
So I wanted to ask you. So you've been mixing for. Can you remind me the artists that you're mixing these days?
Well, before the pandemic, I had just come off tour with Indigo Girls. So
right, there we go.
Yep.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little about that? What was
sure.
Like being on the road?
Awesome. I freaking love it and wish I was out there right now. I love touring. I love being on the bus. I love being with the crew. I love being in a different place every night. It's exciting for me and something I've wanted to do my whole life. I spent a lot of years not doing it. I've done little stints, here and there, touring like 6 months on here, 6 months off, that kind of stuff. But this is my first gig that I've done for a long time. And I say long, it's been like a year or two. And I filled in actually for their front of house guy who was having some medical problems. And what a cool man. Just stayed with me for the first couple shows. And then I took over, and he just like gave me his console and all his thoughts and ideas. And then Michelle, a good friend of mine who's actually helped start SoundGirls, she mixed for Indigo back in the heyday for like 5 or 6 years. So that's kind of the connection there. And then I called her and we talked through like, hey, what was it like when you mixed, and what did you think they liked? Because I got a phone call on Friday night. I was at a local theater actually in Stuart, Florida, mixing, and my phone just started blowing up sitting next to my console. And I was like, there's no way I can answer it. Like, it's just, and then Michelle texted me and said, answer the number as soon as you can. And I text back, I'm mixing a show. And she's like, if you have an intermission, call them back. It's for a tour you have to join tomorrow. And I was like, okay. So at intermission, I called the management, and they said, can you be in New Orleans tomorrow at 2:00? And I said, yeah. And I had no idea what was going on. And I just said, yeah. So that's kind of how that all went down. My first show mixing with them was at the New Orleans Jazz Festival.
Wow.
So it was like, here's the hot seat, dump you in it. And yeah. And on a Digico, which that board I hadn't been on before. Yeah. Just, and so I spent my plane ride watching Digico videos. I called a friend of mine who was like really good at digis, and I said, can I have you on standby at 2:00 tomorrow in case I need you? And he was like, yeah, sure. So I just had like systems in play, ready to go in case I needed anything. And got there, met the girls. We talked for a little bit. They literally just trusted me with their sound. They had never heard me mix, and we went for it. And then I ended up on the road with them for the rest of the year.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really cool.
And talk about being thrown into the fire. Like the jumping on a Digico for the first time is a feat in itself. But then also with the high profile gig, man, that you didn't catch a break on the first one. And
no, I did not.
And I guess if you're gonna put someone through an audition, that's the one. If they nail it, then that's what secured your spot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's a great story. What's your favorite part about their show, about mixing their show? Is there something like that you really enjoy, specifically with the Indigo Girls?
Yeah, one of the things I enjoy, every show is different. They don't stick to the same set list. They'll throw songs in wherever. So I don't have like a pre-programmed file or anything. I don't have I don't run through, like scenes or anything like that. I just run live, and they'll change up guitars. They change guitars or instruments every song. So they play banjo, fiddle, mandolins, all sorts of stuff, acoustics, electrics. We even have like our fiddle violin player. I say fiddle because I'm in Florida and that's a Southern thing. But the violin player also plays a dulcimer and, a bouzouki and some other weird stuff. So at random times, instruments will just come out. And then depending on what cities we're in too, like we landed in Asheville, North Carolina, and we had like a steel guitar player and an upright bass join us. And so it's always just like a live feel of here we go. Let's do it, and people will shout out songs and they'll go, yeah, let's do that one. We remember those lyrics. Let's sing that one. And then our guitar tech, Aaron, will go back and get the right guitars and bring them out. And I'll just like, oh, there we are. We'll find them and go. So it's challenging, but fun.
It sounds fun. Sounds like it keeps you on your toes.
It does. I love it.
Now, before you were mixing Digicos, what were you typically mixing on?
All the churches that I've worked in were either, I started off on a Midas Heritage or a Midas 4K, probably.
Yeah. Nice.
And then that's Analog World. And then switched over to Allen and Heath, I believe, is where I went next, digital. So all the churches I've worked in have been Allen and Heath consoles, either a D-Live. The one I'm in now is an Advantis, the new one.
Cool.
I'm trying to think. Yamaha CL5s. I've done a lot of shows, a lot of festivals on CL5s because those just seem to be on the riders a lot on festivals. I'm not sure why.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Omar likes the CL5.
Yeah. I actually have a QL1 sitting right next to me. That's what my mic's going through right now.
I'm not a real audio guy, so QL5, QL1, like these little smaller, easier boards, I like them. And Heath, I'm like, I don't know what's going on with that board.
Yeah,
somebody else.
To me, the Allen and Heath platform is an easy platform to train somebody on. It's a good platform for volunteers. You can find everything where you're looking for it, So I think for me, that's like if I'm in a house of worship, that I'm recommending that console. It not only sounds great for that environment, but it does the job, and it's easy to train a volunteer on. So I think that's the only reason I've kind of stuck with those in houses of worship, mostly because of the volunteer base,
Don't get me wrong. Allen and Heath, I think, has a good mixture between like the analog world and the digital world. They did it very well on their consoles.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just if you're not, in my opinion, right? If you're not a real audio person who can tune through your ears correctly, you're just messing Allen and Heath up. Like you're not doing it justice. Yeah. If you're someone like me who's a competent A person, if I need to be for like emergencies, and I can use all the tools for digital stuff, I'm your guy because I have shit for hearing, but I'll make it sound decent. I won't give you any feedback. But you want to like hear something real, and you have an Allen Heath board. Don't put me on that because I'm gonna make it sound decent, but not what it should sound like, and it just does no justice to that console. So
yeah,
I totally get that.
And then in like there's a lot of the corporate events I've done where I'm on like a QSC touch mix or Soundcraft AI or whatever that thing's called, expression or something.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what that's called, but I've had to mix on those too. Or a Behringer X32, which I don't even want to talk about that. That hurts my head. But like I have a Midas M32 in like actually sitting next to me in my studio here that I mix on, and I have a little MR18, that I bring out with an iPad if I need to for like little like 1-act or 2-act bands, stuff like that. So it's just what the tool you need for the job, whatever works for the job.
Yeah, it sounds like you're hitting both ends of the spectrum, from the nice high-end Digico stuff to the low-end with the touch mixes. Yeah.
It's hard to not run into those nowadays, especially if you do little club gigs and things like that.
Yep, absolutely. And believe me, I feel your pain on some of those other lower-end consoles, for sure. Now, you mentioned corporate, and I noticed that plate on the wall behind you that says B4mMedia.
Oh, yeah.
So
I was like, which way do I go? That's my head.
Can you tell us a little bit about the corporate work and maybe some of the stuff that you do with B4 and maybe explain what B4 is?
Yeah, it's my company, actually. We started about 6 years ago, and it came out of meeting a couple friends about 12 years ago that they have a company that puts on events for nonprofit organizations, so fundraising events. And they needed an audiovisual person and someone to take that over because that's not really their strong suit at all. So they asked me if I'd be available to their company, and we do a couple of these a year, and we do them high-end Manhattan at the Palace Hotel and things like that. So the easiest for me was to get the gear, right? Buy the gear, have it, train people how to do it, bring people on, and let's start growing this thing and do it. So that's what we did. And I mean, I've been known to throw everything in a box truck and drive to Manhattan or Tulsa or wherever these things happen if I don't get a driver, but it started slow like that, and it has been picking up ever since. And we started taking on some local festivals, some hometown festivals, and then some over Florida, and it grew to like Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and so we're still growing. We're still doing it, but we do corporate stuff. A lot of festivals. We've done a few drive-in shows the last year. And we partner with some other people to do those. A good friend of mine in town is a Christian concert promoter, and he realized I had gear. He has some stuff. He's a promoter, not an AV tech. So some of the stuff he has, he's kind of handed off to me, and he calls me when he has things going on too. So taking over some of the things like that, and a lot of nonprofit organization work, Boys and Girls Club, Heart Association, things like that.
That's great. And then is it just audio, or are you a full service shop?
Full service shop, audio, video, and lighting, and provide the crew as well.
Oh, so you do crewing. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Finding the talent to actually run the gear. That's
Yeah, so that's one of the things we started doing when we went across the nation. Instead of trying to bring everybody from Florida, that was a big part of my heart too, is because I had gone to Full Sail and I knew a lot of people that went out of there and went around the country. Like, it's hard if you're not staying connected with those people and you don't know where they are. Like, where do you find people when I'm based out of Florida. I'm going to Chicago for an event for 4 days. I need load-in people. I need this. I can call like a crew place up there, or I can start networking and see who I know. And since I've been in the business a while, I know a lot of people. So that's kind of the route I went. And then some of them obviously are union houses. So you have to hire union crews. Some are places that do have their own techs available at hotels. So you have to hire those. But most of the time I can bring in who I want and we can mix and mash together,
That's great. Yeah. And if you've worked in New York City, you know how hard it is navigating the whole hotel union thing. It's a not like anywhere else in the country.
Like, yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Not like anywhere else.
I've fought the union a few times up there. But I learned one thing real quick. It's nice to have a little cash on hand and tip people, and you get a lot done.
Absolutely.
Hey, so let me jump in real quick here. So Randy Reed is asking a question here for you, Becky. Have you ever had the mix for a group of persons singing in different languages, not English or Spanish? If so, how was the experience?
Yes, I've done that several times actually. I do a lot of stuff with the city of Orlando, also down at Lake Eola. For years, I've mixed like the Arab American Festival, the Caribbean Festival. So a lot of those different festivals that I've done, no one's speaking the language that I know. And I understand a lot of Spanish, but I can't speak it very well. So even in that, like in churches, sometimes, I did a Spanish service in a church, a Haitian service. So yeah, the challenges are there for sure, but it's quite interesting. If you start just kind of listening and following, you can tell by people's voice inflections, like when they're done, or their body language. So you really have to pay attention. And it's always nice to see if you can find someone on the crew who speaks the actual language and keep them close to you if you're the one mixing.
That's got to be a whole nother experience too, because now you're listening to something that you don't know what they're saying, but you're following through based off of the body language you're seeing, what you're hearing, and how they're saying it. That's a whole nother ball game. So that's interesting. So when you're tuning for that kind of scenario, like what are your kind of go-to methods on that?
So that's kind of cool because it's actually I find that the mixes tend to sound a little better because I'm not listening to the words. I'm listening for frequencies. And I'm picking up other things, like if someone's shouting in the mic or whatever, I can hear distortion right away, whether it's in Spanish, English, Haitian, whatever it's in, you can hear distortion. So it's like that, or you can hear when your high end frequencies a little funky, and not quite there. Reverb is a little challenging, I will say, because it's hard to like bring in a delay or reverb on something that you don't know is the end of the word, or the end of the note.
Right. Yeah.
I just try to not put a lot of bells and whistles on it if I don't know what they're saying,
Right. So what's the most interesting instrument you've had to mic up?
Oh, this is so funny. I was just talking about this with a friend of mine the other day because I was wondering if he had any weird ones. It was an Irish band at the House of Blues, actually. I remember exactly what it was. It looked like a pogo stick. I still don't know if it's an actual instrument. Or if it's something they made, and it had like this bell on the top, just like a regular bell. And when they bang the pogo stick, the bell would like boom, 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 and it was like the weirdest thing. And the guy said, "Can you mic that?" And I was like, "Sure." How? So I gaff taped a battery pack to it with a lavalier mic up the pole.
Good idea.
And when he hit it, it was perfect. So
That's
I was
awesome.
like, okay, that seemed to work. Don't hit it too hard as a battery pack will, but it worked for the song they used it for.
Nothing a little gaff tape can't solve, right?
That's right.
That's awesome. That's really funny. So I guess I have a question for you. I think we talked about earlier that you've done monitors too. And do you have a preference whether you're mixing front of house or monitors? Do you sometimes there's people have their own, like, are very adamant about one or the other. Do you have an opinion, or what do you like to do?
I think I like both equally. They they both have their challenges, and they both have their rewards. I love the crowd. I love being with the crowd around me. I absolutely love that. And pushing a little bit extra kick or something and seeing everybody in the crowd, like that's super fun for me to mix that way. I feel it more. I also love to be on stage and make sure my artist is taken care of, and that everything that I can do to make their experience better for the crowd. So I think I love them equally. The intensity is the same for me, that you have to be on your toes and paying attention, and the customer service aspect of our business is there in both. So I don't really have this one's better and that one's worse or whatever. I guess it's probably more dependent on artist, and if I really like the artist, I don't mind doing monitors at all.
Right. That definitely helps.
If they're a jerk, then I'll do front of house.
And then they don't know the difference. That's why you picked one or the other.
Right.
That's great. Excellent. I had another question that just totally escaped my mind. Omar, do you got anything you want to ask Beckie?
So Beckie, I kind of want to go back a little bit. You had said something in the beginning that I felt 100% related to what we're doing here. So you said you were starstruck and a little bit by some of the interviews you've done on the SoundGirls podcast. And I kind of wanted to, like, this is kind of what we're doing for you, right? Like, who's highlighting the behind the scenes people that are highlighting the people that they're highlighting, right? Which I felt like no one was doing, which is why we wanted to bring you on here to highlight who you are and what you're doing for all that. So, can we backtrack a little bit to the podcast side, and can you tell me a little bit of, what is, like, just give me an example, like, what was the most interesting interview you've done so far on the SoundGirls podcast?
The most interesting one? I don't know.
Or which one? Not interesting. Let's say, which one did you have the most fun doing because of who the speaker was, or who was going on talking, or just like a surprise? Like we did a show recently on the podcast side, right, where we were talking to Ray from the Feed the Crew podcast, and it was same thing where we were talking about her and what they're doing and how they're giving to the community, giving back, and ended up, for me, what was interesting is we started talking about relationships for the last like 30 minutes. And it was really interesting because it was good to hear, right, from not only just the community, but from her and her people, the same problems everybody has in our industry with dating because of the hours, because of the strange, like, hey, the client needs me to stay overtime and we work these weird hours and we're not really 9 to 5, but and then like, for example, your whole touring scenario, right? Like, you got the call and the next day you're on a tour. So if you were with somebody, I mean, hey, by the way, for the next 6 months I'm on the road, right? Like that's not common. But for us, it's like, well, that's just business. That's how we run things.
Yeah.
So do you have a podcast like that you did?
There's a couple that really impacted me personally. One, Jerry Palumbo. I'm sorry, I'm butchering another name. She has been a broadcast engineer for sports for over 30 years. And nobody knows who she is. I mean, people in broadcast sports do, but she's done NASCAR. She's done Super Bowls. She's done just freaking everything, and we started talking to her and it turned into a 2-piece podcast or a 2-part podcast because there's a lot of sexual harassment that still is in the broadcast world. And a lot of women are just not in that world. And that was where my track right out of school, I wanted to be in a broadcast truck and run sound for sports. Like, that was a goal of mine when I graduated, and I could never break into it. So to be able to talk to someone who did and get to know what's going on there and what's happening in that world still, and how there's a lot of women are still boxed out of that world. We talked about it in depth and for 2 episodes. And that was just, to me, that I felt like we accomplished something there too. So it was really cool, and such a cool person that she is too. So we've continued to talk and build a friendship out of that too, which is awesome. And then Jess Fenton is a producer and podcast editor and all sorts of wonderful things. She's in Brooklyn, and she has a series on YouTube called Proof in Music, and she interviews a bunch of women who, and that's where the title came from. Like, hey, there's proof in music that women exist in this world. And so she started doing this YouTube thing before the pandemic. Some of the greatest interviews I've watched on her little series too. So that inspires me. Seeing what other people are doing, and both of those guests were huge for me. I think, like, getting to know them and their passions and seeing how they broke in the business and helping others too.
No, and that's definitely a great story, because that's, like you're saying, this is somebody who is now leading the industry in that direction, to say, hey, I kind of broke the barrier, right? Yep. Now for the next one coming in, you have someone to thank, and you spotlighted that person, say, hey, this is the person who you could thank, because now you have the opportunity, because they already did all this work for you, right? Yep. So Randy Reed is here asking another question. He's saying, I feel your passion and joy for what you do, which I admire, but is it possible to share your worst experience and what you have learned, I'm sorry, and how persons can recover from bad shows?
Oh, Lord. The bad shows, we always remember all of them, right? Sure. I've had my fair share of bad shows. I had a whole power distro 5 minutes before the show started. Somebody flipped a generator switch on my generator and blew my entire speaker stack. That was my worst day. I was standing in front of the speaker stack when it happened, getting ready to head back to front of house, and I heard pop, 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 all the way up. And I was like, no. I ran back, and my distro said 235 volts or some crazy number it shouldn't have said. And I lost my crap. So that, and trying to figure out who the hell flipped the switch and all those things. And basically I had a show that had to go on in 5 minutes, and what in the hell were we going to do with no PA? So that turned into a real quick scramble. Speakers on sticks, monitors turned around, all sorts of other crazy stuff, monitors from front of house. Yeah, it was a nightmare. But I think one of those lessons I learned quickly was to make sure whoever your electrician is actually certified, and you see paperwork and know that they're certified, and no one touches that crap, and you have a security guard standing by there by your important stuff, and one with you on festivals like that, because things just happen, we never did really track down what happened there, but that was an expensive lesson and also a sad day. Other shows, things have happened, where my consoles just froze, like right in the middle of a second song. I lost my entire console. Instead of freaking out and panicking and all that kind of stuff, which I used to do early on in my career and call everyone I knew. I learned probably in my early 20s, take a deep breath. Whew, it might feel like 70 years to you, but it's probably 30 seconds to everyone else. Take a breath, get your head about you, remember your signal flow, what happened, find a solution, remain calm.
And that right there is probably the best advice I've ever heard, because I myself have done that where I need to just take a beat, right? Like, hey, something's going wrong, give me a second. But you always have those shows where that one client is over, you're like, hey, is it ready yet? Is it ready? Like, relax, give me a second. Give me a second.
Oh, yeah. When we blew the speaker stack, there were instant 30 engineers and, everybody and their brother knew what happened and what went wrong. And I was like, hold on, everybody stop. Everybody stop. Give me a second, and that's all you need, really, because we have the intelligence and we have it all in there somewhere. But with all of this coming at you, you can't problem solve because you're trying to put out too many fires and answer questions. So I'm just like, everybody stop. Let me think for a second. Okay, do this.
I used to for a company I used to work for, we had an award for the freelancer who would say, why don't we just? That was the thing. Like, they'd walk into a show and, we've done all the pre-production, we've packed the show, with the big picture in mind. And then there's always that one person who's like, well, why don't we just? And you're like, stop. We're not doing it that way because we have this bigger picture in mind. But it's always those, why don't we just, or why didn't you just do this? Or all you have to do is, it's like, well, let's take a step back because I'm the person who has to do it.
Well, so, and I think some of that too, like a lot of that, I hear that a lot from younger people, right? They want to be important. They want to know everything. They want you to know that they're important and they know their stuff. So they're like, hey, why don't we do that? That's great. I have a few trainees with me right now who are like that. And I keep trying to tell them, listen, I'm not trying to be like, I know everything, but I have been doing this 20 years. And the reason we're doing it this way is because I have an end result in my head that you don't know about yet. And so just follow me, be with me, come along on the ride and just watch what we're doing. And, it's pretty funny to watch. In a week or two later, they'll be like, oh, I get it. Okay. That makes sense. You're like, right. Like, I'm trying to teach you the right way, not the hard way, Yeah,
absolutely. That's great. So I was going to ask you, like, just some of the things that, us audio people talk about and have opinions about. Omar probably remembers when I did an audio show on AV Tech Talks, what I planned to be a 5-minute conversation turned into a 45-minute conversation. And it was talking about microphones. So I'm curious, as a vote for vocal mic, what's some of your favorite go-to vocal mics?
I will take a Beta 58 any day. Shure Beta 58. Especially if I don't know who the artist is, or if I haven't heard them, or I have a ton in my inventory, because I know I can make it sound good no matter who's on it. KSM 9s are also a big favorite of mine. I'm having a new favorite right now that's rivaling the 58. The SE V7s are actually pretty nice for a cheap price point mic. The Telefunken M81, great vocal mic, durable, it's all in the same price range too, I think, except the KSM 9, obviously.
Right.
But I love that,
That's awesome. And then because I'm a fanatic for drum sounds, do you have a favorite kick drum mic?
I am old school, Shure 91 inside, 52 outside. I like that combination so I can get a nice punch and beater head sound,
I am the same way. That is my preferred go-to combo as well. Is there a kick drum mic you don't like? Is there something you're like, I don't?
Yeah, AKG. I can't think of I don't like it so much. I still don't remember the name of it. The AKG one that looks like an egg. I can't.
Yeah, the D112.
That it is. Yeah.
Yep. Gotcha. Yes, I'm actually I don't like the D6. The Audix D6.
I'm not a giant fan of it either.
It just, you know
I
what?
like it on a tom 3, like a floor tom or a tom, like I'll put a D6 on one of those, no problem. But I'm not a big fan of it on a kick drum.
I feel like it just makes every drum sound the same. So it's great for like if you're doing like that hardcore heavy metal stuff where they really want a lot of click and they want it to sound like a sample. It's good for that. And the only place I've really loved it was putting it on it was an indie rock band. I used it where the drummer didn't have a porthole at all.
Oh, really?
And because it's so clicky, I was able to get something, salvageable to cut through, being an indie rock band. It needed something to click, and it worked out pretty well for that. But yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. I'm a 9152 kind of engineer, so that's great. So while we have just a couple minutes left, I wanted to hear a little bit about what you have coming up next. Are there any things you're excited about as far as, are you doing any appearances anywhere or anything?
Yeah, we're actually doing a Ask the Experts about podcasting webinar. The SoundGirls are doing that. You can find it on the SoundGirls page, soundgirls.org/podcasting. And you can go on there and ask questions ahead of time about podcasting. And we're going to have a bunch of different people like Chris Leonard. He's from... Yep, I'm going to mess all this up. I probably should get the thing out and read it. But Chris does Signal to Noise podcast. Filey Davis owns 23DB Productions in Brooklyn. She's a podcasting wizard. Laura Davidson from Shure is going to be moderating it. And Larry Milburn from Roadie Free Radio and myself. So we're all doing that coming up in the next month. And then I'm also going to do a Shure webinar with a bunch of people, Samantha Potter being one, about houses of worship. So house of worship sounds. So that'll be fun.
Oh, that's great.
Other than that, I've got a couple of corporate events that just peeked up over the horizon. Yay. Yay for work, right? Yay for work coming back.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great. Yes. Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Samantha Potter. I think I've done one panel with her on Brian Maddox's show, the Audio Opinion show once. So yeah, no, she's great. So I'm sure that'll be that'll be a great webinar. I'm going to make sure I put that on my schedule. But
yeah, you should find that in the Shure. They'll be announcing it soon. It's going to be on the Shure website. So
awesome. Omar, tell me what else you got going on.
So I got nothing going on. Becky, before we let you go for the night, obviously, thank you for being here so much. Thank you for the plethora of information. Obviously, I brought in the right co-host tonight because you guys were jamming on the audio stuff. And I was like, I'm a video guy. I know Becky personally, so like my conversation might be a little different, but you guys are touching on some really good points and everything tonight. But before I let you go for the night, is there anything you want to tell the audience about anything you got going on between yourself or SoundGirls or B4mMedia, or just, Becky's like, hey, if you want to be a successful in the industry, do these things in your life and you'll just make your life easier. Is there anything you would impart to anybody who's watching tonight about, no pressure, by the way, I know this is on the spot, but anything before we let you go that you could give to the audience, say, hey, if you guys really want to make it in the industry, if your girls want to make it in the industry, this number one rule will get you farther than anything else you do.
Yeah. Stay open to learning. Always learn something new, even if it's not your forte. Find someone like Omar if video is not your forte, and bring him in, and like I have, and say, okay, Omar, tell me what an NDI is and what do we do? Learn that stuff, because I'm telling you, just a little bit that you learn. I mean, you never know when a pandemic's going to hit, right? And you have to install video now. So those are the kind of things that keep us going in this industry, is being open to learning new things all the time, every day. And it's never... Ask the questions. It's not a dumb thing to ask questions. Ask them, and if you don't get the right answer or the answer you're looking for, go ask it to someone else. Don't give up. Stay persistent, and you'll get to do your dream.
I love that. And if you guys want to hear any more from Becky, obviously tune into the SoundGirls podcast. Tons more information there. Tons of amazing people they've talked to already. We've also talked to Becky and Susan prior in the past. Probably 2 years ago now.
How was that 2 years ago already?
I know, right? It's crazy. 2 years ago, we talked about mansplaining, and mansplaining was a new one for me because I didn't know what that word meant. But it was more of an exploratory, and we kind of did a thing between Regal Compost, myself, Becky, and Susan about mansplaining what our impression of that word was, how it was perceived, and we gave you some scenarios, and I think it was a very powerful conversation, honestly, because I learned a lot. And it was interesting to get the perspective from you girls about how it wasn't exactly if a man tries to explain something. It was more of how you come off and came across to say those things, where it's like, hey, I'm trying to just say because I'm informative, like me, versus I'm talking down to you because I think you don't know it, right?
Yeah. What's your motive?
Exactly. And I think that's a huge difference that people need to pick up on. But again, Becky, thank you so much for being here tonight. That was excellent information you gave out to everybody, and I hope to bring you back on, and I hope to tune into the next 2 shows you got going on as well. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Omar and Ed. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Becky. It was great getting to talk to you. And next time you're up in New York, make sure we connect, because I'd love to meet you and hang out in the city.
That'd be so much fun. We'll definitely do it.
Awesome. So, Omar, man.
Yeah, man. You listen. You guys were clicking right off the bat here. This was awesome. I knew bringing you to kind of help me out with Austin and his kid today was the call, and you guys definitely had a lot of similarities when it comes to band stuff. I was very surprised about that. So, before we wrap up, are there some things that are some universals in the audio world, or is it just you guys have preferences that maybe there's the workflow you guys have, right?
So a little bit of both. So that some of the stuff is pretty, like when we were talking about kick drums and mic preferences. I mean, that you can talk to 100 different audio engineers and get 100 different answers of things they like and prefer. But some of the stuff we were talking about are kind of standard, not fringe kind of things. They're pretty common. You would get common answers there. But yeah, we have similar workflows. It's funny that she mentioned she's from a big family, a lot of aunts and uncles, and I've got 12 on my dad's side, so it's just a bunch of funny similarities. Actually, I didn't mention it, didn't ask her, but I saw that she's from Michigan originally, and that's where my wife is from. So many things in common with Becky that I think her and I just need to become BFFs is what it is, and super awesome to get the chance to chat with her, and looking forward to the upcoming things she has going on. I'm going to make sure I sign up for the Ask the Experts webinar. See if I can throw in some cool questions, maybe some curveballs for them, and then definitely the Shure webinar. I already watch a lot of the Shure webinars, so pretty excited to see that coming up for her. So.
Yeah, so that's awesome, man. And honestly, I think you guys would be great. Becky's a great person. I've met her, and we've hung out, we've worked together, we've been on different shows, and she's someone, if you don't know who she is, this is the moment to get to know her, obviously. But definitely connect with her, because she's an amazing person, both with business and personal. Probably one of my favorite people that I know in the industry, honestly, in my opinion. Right.
And everything she talked about with SoundGirls, amazing organization, and the fact that she mentioned the things that you've sat in on, and she said it's not just for men, certain aspects of the site and everything. So that's phenomenal. So very, very, very cool.
Yeah, 100%. So Ed, real quick before we end tonight, you want to go real quick on what we're doing Monday night for AV Tech Talks?
Yes. So this coming Monday, we're bringing Jeff Widgren back again, because on February 8th, when he was there talking about Zoom with me, there were a lot of questions. So many great questions. We brought up a ton of great information, but there were a lot of great questions we didn't get to answer because we just ran out of time. So we asked Jeff, hey, could you just come back while it's still fresh? We'll go through all the unanswered questions first. We'll do some more of the demos, because there were a couple of demos he and I had planned that we didn't get to do. And then we'll obviously always be taking questions during the show as well. So we're going to be looking at Zoom again. It's kind of part 2 of Zoom. Some unanswered questions, tips, and tricks is the name of the show. That'll be on Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Same place we always are. And we're streaming now to Facebook and YouTube during the show, as well as having the Zoom webinar. So you got 3 different ways to watch us in full 1080p. So come join us. Bring your questions. It'll be a good time. We'll talk about Zoom.
That's right. I totally forgot. Yeah. So if you guys aren't aware, we are now officially 1080p on the AV Tech Talk side, and we are streaming to both Facebook and YouTube. We're going to do a big push this week about YouTube and trying to bring some people to that side of the world. We are still taking questions live between the Facebook side and the YouTube side and the Zoom side. So whatever is your preferred platform, really, pretty much just join us on there on either YouTube, Facebook, or Zoom directly. We'll share that in the comments below. And Ed, so usually I leave Austin, which is my mastermind of words for this show, to close out the night. Do you feel comfortable closing out, or do you want me to just close it out and we'll just go with our sponsor and make it a night?
You know what? I'm gonna let you take it, Omar, because like I said, I can't replace the great Austin Jackson. I'm just here filling in, so I'm gonna let you take the closing. And thanks everybody, and thanks again to Beckie. It was a great conversation. I'm glad I could be a part of it. So thank you.
For sure. So everybody, thank you again for being here tonight with us so much. I will not try to replace Austin, obviously, but please leave a comment saying happy birthday for his son. He's having an amazing night tonight with his kid. He texted me apologizing again he couldn't be here tonight, but obviously I told him, listen, your family's more important than anything else. I don't have any cool words to say. I don't have anything prepared. Austin is honestly the master of words, and you know me, the less I could talk, the better, honestly. So I'm going to leave it with the sponsor slide, and then I'm going to kill the stream for tonight. But again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the questions, and look forward to bringing Beckie Campbell back again. Hope you guys enjoyed talking with her as much as we did. And again, see you guys on the next show.